The exam 1 is extended until today, end of day. And of course the quizzes for part 2 are also extended to today. If you already done them, you're done. If you haven't done them, still time to do them. And all the other deadlines remain unchangified. Yeah, so last time we were talking about our good dead friend Spinoza doing his Spinoza stuff, and we saw that his view essentially is everything's God, so we end up with pantheism. So it's all God. It's not like there's God, there's other stuff. It's really not that we're like kind of within God, it's that all there is God. So our separate existence is an impossibility. Now, because of this, and nope, still working. Because Spinoza believed that God is what God is by necessity, that means there is no free will. And so everything that happens by necessity. So there are two types of events. One is things that happen, which must happen and cannot happen otherwise. So if we were to say, could Hillary Clinton have beaten Donald Trump? The answer is no, because she didn't, so she couldn't have. So whatever has happened must have happened, couldn't be otherwise. The second type of event are things that are impossible, that cannot occur, and those are things that never happen. So everything that occurs either must happen or cannot happen. So it's impossible that for Hillary to have beaten Trump, because Trump must have won. Is it?
You're on page 73, right?
74. Yep. And the freedom and necessity, and the two types of events. So free will for him is an illusion. And again, he gave the metaphor, the analogy of if a stone could think, and the stone was being thrown, it would think that it was guiding its path, but of course would not be. So we are like stones being thrown through life. Now, one of the things we saw with our good dead friend Descartes is the mind-body problem. And in Descartes' view, you've got classic dualism. You have a body, you are a mind. Now, Spinoza ends up with kind of a...
Say that again, if your body, your mind.
Oh, sorry. You have a body, you are a mind. So your body isn't you, you just happen to have one, controlled by
That's Descartes, isn't it?
Yep, it's Descartes. Now with Spinoza, he does what's called dual aspect theory, which is kind of weird. Works like this. Now, God's qualities for him, he takes God to have, well, everything. Under Descartes, we had mental stuff, substances, have the quality of thought, but were not extended. And extended objects, bodies, were extended but didn't think. And Spinoza says of God that God is, you can say that God has extension. So he's got, length, width, depth, etc. And of course he also thinks. Now, God, of course, as Spinoza sees it, has more attributes than we can understand. So we can only say some of the things about God. Now then there's the question of, again, one of the classic problems in metaphysics is the mind-body problem. How do thought and extension, mind and body, relate? Now Spinoza takes, in addition to his weird pantheism, he also takes a kind of a weird solution to the mind-body problem. So firstly, he rejects Hobbes's materialism. So materialism is out. Then he may think that he would embrace dualism, but he rejects that as well. And here's how he does it. He claims that you can say correctly that God is mind and God is body. God is extended and God is thinking. And this is called the dual aspect theory, in which, well, one way to look at it kind of crudely is that everything is mind, but everything is also body. It's not that God has a body and a mind, like a dualistic view. It's that everything is mind, but everything is also body.
Everything is God.
Yeah, so how would this work? Well, here's how you can kind of look at it. So let's say this is God, from Spinoza's view, not actual size. And you've got something, in God. Like you got, let me use the example of this eraser. Now, Spinoza says that all physical events are mental events, and all mental events are physical events. It's all based on how you describe it. To use a crappy metaphor, everyone's probably, this will be badly drawn, so terrible. Everyone's seen like the rabbit duck thing. We're looked at one way, like this is the beak, you know, crazy psycho duck. If it's this the eye and this is the ears, then it's crazy psycho rabbit, depending on how you look at it. And so you can look at God, you know, looked at one way, he's body, looked at another, he's mind. So,
You know something, until you said that,
oh,
if you look at it one way, it is something else, you look at it another, it is.
yeah, it should be drawn better. But you know, with the budget we've got, we can't get good at it. Sorry about that. So we take this eraser, you can think of it the following way. It is, you know, a mode or part of God. And so you can think of it as an object, you know, as, you know, part of God's body. But you can also think of it in terms of thought. Now, God, being a special case, is this. Since God is omniscient, his idea of the object contains everything that the object is. So for God, there is no difference between the thought of an object and the object itself. It's missing nothing. So in a way, it's kind of weird, namely that, you know, God is mind, God is body. He doesn't have a mind and a body, he's mind or body. So looked at one way, God is a physical entity containing physical objects. Looked at another way, God is a mental entity containing mental objects. But since God is God, his objects of his thought are complete. They miss nothing. Whereas like in a lesser being, the thought of a thing is less than the thing. To use a metaphor, God is God, so his virtual reality is reality. So he ends up saying, you can describe all of reality entirely in the language of thought. But you can also just turn around and describe all of reality with the language of extension. So he ends up being not a dualist, but dual aspect. Thought is body, body is thought. And again, it works because of God, supposedly. So then, what's our ultimate goal? Well, Spinoza's deal in all this was a very practical deal. He believed that we were trapped in bondage to our feelings. And if we put our happiness, or hopes of happiness, on other people, things, and places, etc., well, other people can betray us. They can die. If we put our hopes in our money, we can lose our money. If we put our hopes and happiness in our career, we can lose our job. And so we must have put our hope in something that can never ever betray us and never die. And of course that is God. Now, he thinks our love of God, though, is not an emotional love. So what type of love is it? Well, he thinks we need to achieve an intellectual love, where we love God in the same way that a mathematician would love mathematics. So it's not, even though it's love, it's not like a passionate love, it's a intellectual love, which seems kind of weird. Now, does God love us? Well, he says God doesn't have passion, joy, love, hate, or sorrow, so on one hand, no. But since we're part of God, insofar as God loves himself, he loves us. So it's like insofar as you love yourself, you love your liver. So we are like God's liver. So then, how do we achieve this ultimate happiness? Well, he thinks that his metaphysics is the path to happiness. Because once you realize the truth of Spinoza's view, at least according to him, you'll achieve happiness. And here's how. And I mentioned this before. The problem we run into is our emotions. You know, part of it is forming attachments to the wrong thing. So solution one is, don't love other stuff or anybody else, love God. Because God never lets you down, never die. The other thing is to realize that everything is determined, that things cannot be otherwise, things cannot be different. You know, whatever's going to be is going to be. Whatever was, whatever is, and there's nothing you can do. And he believes that most of our problems come from wishing things are different in the past, wishing we'd done something different. That's a cause of regret. Or looking to the future, hoping that we can do something different in the future, cause of hope. And if we realize that everything is determined, that we cannot do otherwise, then he thinks we would achieve freedom. We'd be free of emotions because we'd realize that there is, a friend of mine says, there's nothing we can do. Whatever will be, whatever was, was. So, for example, think of like all of Hillary Clinton's supporters, who were people like here on NPR quite a bit saying about how like the moment Trump was elected, they felt like they were dying. And I believe them. You know, they truly sound like they were dying. And Trump supporters who were like, you know, they felt like they'd been reborn. You know, they finally taken their country back from those people, and everything was great once again. The one people, you know, those people. You know, people and taken away from them. The forgotten Americans got the country back from the remembered Americans. That's the logic of it, because if the forgotten people win, then the remembered people, I guess, lose. So Spinoza would say, he would say to the followers of Hillary, nothing, you know, the people are beating themselves up. If only I'd gotten out there and, you know, canvassed more. If only I had, you know, posted that really burning tweet, or really got that meme out of there on Facebook, or, you know, smoked just like one more joint, everything would have worked out correct. I don't know how liberals work. I assume that's how they work. Cookies and joints. And so, a good band name, copyright. So, if people are beating themselves over, there's something more I could have done, something more I could have done. And the answer is, Spinoza would say, hey, don't worry. There's nothing you could have done. Trump won. Trump could not have lost. Hillary could not have won. There's nothing you could do. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. And similarly, you'd say to the Trump people, no reason, you know, you shouldn't be jumping around all excited because Trump had to win. You know, nothing could have been different. It'd be like cheering, you know, the sun rose, or sad the sun rose. Nothing you can do. So I think in that case you'll be free. So freedom is not freedom from necessity, but the realization that you have no freedom. So true freedom, it's almost like Orwellian. True freedom is realizing you are not free. And when you realize that, you're totally free. That's what we do.
Contradiction.
Yeah, seemingly a contradiction. So how does that work? Imagine that you were devastated by Trump's victory. Can you say, well, he had to win. There's nothing he could have done. Hillary lost, so I feel great now, or I feel okay now. I'm cool with it all right. No, I mean, that doesn't seem to be super helpful. Also, there's a practical problem of, if the view is that everything is fixed, then giving people advice is, yeah, it's pointless. It's like it's like shouting advice at a movie screen. It's not going to do. No, don't go in there. Hi. Yeah. And Spinoza would say that's what life is like. We're shouting advice at a movie screen. But of course, if we really believe there is determined, we wouldn't give anybody advice because they're just going to do what they're going to do. So then, what happens to us when we die? Now, in normal Christianity, standard Christianity, in Islam, you get what? After you die? Yeah, you get an afterlife, either good or bad. Now, Spinoza thinks there is no personal immortality. In a way, because there is no individuals. Everything is just God, you know, so he's always here.
Which brings up a question to the thought that you said earlier. You said he thinks, or he feels like, don't love anybody, just, you know, love God. Well, if he said everything is God, and you don't love anybody, then how can you say you're loving God? Because everything is God.
Yeah.
So if you can't love anybody or anything but love God, it's impossible to love God because you can't love anything.
Well, you can love God. God can't love you. You can love God. God can love himself, but so indirectly love you.
Say that again.
Well, I mean, it's in a way it sounds kind of crazy because, like you said, Spinoza's view is God doesn't have passions and love, etc. So he doesn't love you individually, and you're not, you know, on his view, we're not individuals. We're just part of God. So we really can't.
You can't love God.
Love God because we don't exist in a way to love him.
So that's what I'm saying.
But God loves himself, so he loves us because we're part of God. Yeah, it ends up being pretty problematic.
That's why I say, and they have these people and they follow these people. That's the
Well,
ironic part.
the thing with Spinoza is that he does show, like, logically, if you believe in a perfect God that can't be otherwise, he shows where that goes. So one way you could look at, I mean, Spinoza thinks he's right. But
I know he does, that's the hurting part.
yeah, everyone
That
thinks
it makes no sense and he thinks.
well, everyone thinks they're right. But you could also see it as like a cautionary tale that, you know, you can't have a philosophically perfect God and have all the other stuff that we want, like a loving God. And that's why you get in trouble, you know, because people realize the implication. You know, if you have a necessary God, then God, a perfect being that's necessary, that means all there is God, nothing can be any different. And so normal religion just goes out. And so it has, and so you can see this as a reductio, like this is so crazy. He takes it, he doesn't make any logical mistakes, he takes it where it should go. And so the thing to do is say, not like he went, you know, the wrong way, but he had the wrong starting, he got on the wrong train. Just don't get on that train, because that train goes to, you know, crazy place. So just stay off that train. Now he does offer us, as a form of afterlife, to mention that there is something that remains of us that is eternal. It is always true, it shall always be true that we always were, you know, that we once were. And he thinks, yeah, if you realize this, you'll realize you have a peace of eternity. It's part of God.
But if you die into nothingness, I mean, like the animals, we believe animals to die into nothingness. I don't see how you say he's following a logical train of thought.
Well, because if we don't exist individually, like if we, in a way, if we never were, when we like
When we
die,
die, we can't do nothing and nobody.
yeah, our mind doesn't keep on going past our death. But it is true that we always
Exist.
were. So to use an analogy, like in a novel, like the power of the character, like think of Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet die, sorry, spoiler. But it's true that they're always going to be in the book. You know, you go back to the other pages. I mean, they're dead at the end, but they exist forever in Romeo and Juliet. And so in the, you know, if you think of this as like a book, the book of the universe, the pages you're in, you're always in there forever. And God goes back and looks at that, fondly remembering. Yeah, but it is pretty crazy. So Spinoza does show, if you go with the starting points, perfect God and determinism and necessity, you end up in a really crazy place. And sometimes, you know, being a warning to others is, you know, good. Like, don't go there. It's like, you know, the person who goes in the room and comes out covered in blood and monsters. You're just like, okay, we're gonna go in that room. Now we turn to our good dead friend, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. A little background for Gottfried. He was born in what we now call Germany, although back then it was a collection of separate states. It wasn't until Otto von Bismarck with blood and iron unified Germany. Then they brought us World War I, then World War II, then we broke them up, and they got the band back together again, probably for World War III. Counting on you, Germany. Make it happen. Now, Germany got pretty busted, or what we call Germany now, got pretty busted up. The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, was pretty disruptive, as you might imagine 30 years of war would be. The common people in that Germanic region spoke German, the upper classes spoke French, and the educated people spoke or wrote Latin. Now there was also, of course, the Protestant Reformation, which also disrupted things quite a bit. Now during this time period, about the only major German thinker was Leibniz. And unfortunately for Leibniz, he later got superseded by Kant, and so he's always going to be like second German fiddle. He was born in 1646, and he was a child of genius. He graduated from the university at 17, got his doctorate at 21, when most people are just legally drinking, and was offered a chance to be a professor, but turned it down. He decided to become a diplomat. He traveled Europe as a diplomat, met many of the famous folks of his time, such as Nicolas Malebranche, who was a French Cartesian, Robert Boyle, the English chemist. He even met Spinoza. This guy's crazy. Now, in addition to his diplomatizing, he also built a calculating machine. You see history of computers, you'll see Leibniz in it, because he, excuse me, as mentioned, built a calculating machine that could do lots of math stuff. Now, as a philosopher, he was pretty scattered in the sense that he didn't, unlike someone like Plato, who created this coherent system. Leibniz mostly just wrote stuff, essays, pamphlets, a couple books, and just kind of put it out there. His main interest was in mathematics. Now, as a diplomat, he hoped to reunite the Catholic and Protestant churches back into one church. How'd that work out? Didn't work. But when was the last time you had a Christian war, of Christian against Christian over Christianity? I mean, aside from the midterms.
Have non-violent debates all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, so the murdering, over sectarian concerns of Christianity, largely not a thing. So that kind of worked out. Maybe they're not one unified church, but at least people aren't like killing each other too much about Christianity. So win. He also wanted to unify Europe. How'd that work out?
It ended up worse.
Well, Europe's kind of unified except for Brexit, and of course the right-wing fascism sweeping through Europe once again. So so it worked out for a while. He died in 1716, is of course still dead today. Now his main works include the new essays concerning human understanding, the Theodicy, which deals with the problem of evil, and the monadology, which deals with monads. Fun to say, but weird to say. Now, his method came out of mathematics. He had a great deal of faith in logic, and his, in addition to his many other claims to fame, probably his biggest contribution was a discovery that you could reduce all of math to zeros and ones, which of course gives rise to binary logic, which of course gives rise to, well, today, the smartphone that you have, all the Xboxes, PlayStations, computers, interwebs. And so all the information superhighway of today can trace a big chunk of it back to our good dead friend Leibniz. And of course Leibniz traces his stuff back. It's all comes from everything we got comes from somebody long dead. Everything is kind of tweaked a little bit. Now he believed that since this works so well in math, he believed you could do it with everything. What you do is basically this. In the case of, he believed it would work in metaphysics, physics, ethics, all the things. So here's how it would work. Step one. You would take all the concepts within a field, say metaphysics or law or ethics, and reduce it down to the simple components. Now math works really well because you can do it all down to zeros and ones. You can do all the maths. Now, in the case of geometry, it would come down to points and the geometric planes, etc. Now we thought the same could be done again for everything. So in the case of law, you reduce it down to the components of law. In the case of metaphysics, the components of metaphysics. Step two, once you reduce it down to the symbols, you represent these concepts by mathematical symbols. He believed, kind of following Aristotle, that there is a language of thought. And what you can do is, you can represent every thought, he claimed, by using these symbols. So basically a symbolic logic for the mind. Now this, of course, has implications, they're still around today. Namely, if thought is a matter of this processing these symbols, that means that AI would be possible. You just need the right language and something to process them properly. So step step one, get the simple bits. Step two, get the symbols, get the programming language. Step three, formulate the correct rules for combining the symbols. Now he believed once you had the rules for putting things together, then you'd be able to tell which things were true or false solely based on the structure. True things would fit the structure, false things would be ungrammatical. They wouldn't fit the structure.
So the true things would be ones and the false would be zeros?
In a way, because we have true, one, zero, false. But in the case of, he believed anything could be reduced down. Like in the case of math, you just have two symbols. In the case of like law, you might have a lot more. But his belief was, you reduce it down to simple bits. Then you come up with symbols. I'll just make some up. Probably from a video game I saw once or something. Or Babylon 5, I don't know. Probably the shadows. Probably just like summon something. Oh well, over here. There we go. I stopped. It's not coming. Actually, I think at halfway here, it's probably in the governor's mansion. Have fun with that. Yeah, demons, you shouldn't play with them. Just say. So we have the symbols. Then what we do is we get the logical language, and the idea is we can combine these symbols together. And his claim is just like we would know whether a sentence was grammatically correct or not without just looking at it. He thinks we could do the same thing with these languages. So if it was grammatically correct, it would be true. If it was grammatically incorrect, it would be untrue. So one way this could be used is if you have this language and the logic, and you had enough processing power, you'd be able to figure out everything. Because you just create claims and see if they're structured properly. Now, he was of course working, he had his hand crank calculator, but today, what we're doing is something very similar. Think of like big data. What big data is trying to do is find out what are the bits of data that cover everything. They're trying to get all, and basically their approach is, let's just hoover it all up. Like Facebook, just grabs everything you put on there, gets sucked into the machine. Then of course what they do, they can't really do much with just like pictures and stuff. They reduce them down to, they take the bits, reduce them down to symbols they can use in their programs, and of course they create algorithms, create the programs, and then grind that stuff. And of course the dream of Facebook is what? To take your data, grind it, and get what? A way to sell you.
Get your information.
Yeah, they take your information so they can sell you whatever.
Stuff that's catered to you.
Yeah, and so that's kind of their end game. More benignly, the people, weather researchers, they're trying to reduce all weather down to like what are the minimal bits, and then symbolize it, create a program. And if you had like the perfect weather program, what would it do?
Reduce the name.
Yeah, it would tell you. You'd be able to tell this is what the weather's going to be. And so in a way, Leibniz had the dream of big data before people were talking about big data. And the idea, he believed it was going to be a benign thing, because his view was you'd be able to communicate in universal language, philosophers and scientists, and you could discover new truths just by combining stuff, and you could solve disputes, because you would do the math, so to speak, and you'd know, like, is capital punishment okay? Should college be free? Should we build a wall? And then you give you the answer.
You didn't go there.
Well, because the answer could be yes. Maybe the answer would be build a big wall, the biggest of walls. Pink Floyd, they built that wall. It worked out well for them. It's a very successful album. Pink Floyd, The Wall, successful movie.
Did they try to make somebody else pay for it?
We pay for it when you buy the albums. And then, yeah, someone else did pay for it. Now, he thought this could be done. Now, his timeline was about 2 years for metaphysics and morality, 5 years for everything. How'd that work out? Actually, it did. If you get your PhD in philosophy, you get access to all the truth about everything. But of course, one of the truths is if you'd be out of work as a philosopher. So one thing we do as philosophers is we swear to protect the existence of the answers to everything. And we do that by telling people there is a answer to everything in this book. and it's real. And of course, that sounds so crazy that no one ever believes us, because it's insane. So we protect the book by saying the book exists, but it's so crazy no one believes it, so the book is perfectly protected. Thank you, Leibniz. So in addition to trying to create these perfect systems, what was he up to? Well, Leibniz, like our good dead friend Descartes and others, ran into sort of the classic problem. During the time of this modern era of enlightenment, religious faith was still really strong. So people like Newton, Descartes, Locke, they were, Leibniz, very religious. Hobbes, not so much. And so they want to, but they're also very into mathematics and science. So they want to reconcile religion, freedom, with all this new science. And Leibniz was wanting to do the same thing. Now, our good dead friend Descartes, of course, tried to solve the problem by saying, here's how we fix it. Science gets the body. Religion, morality gets, and freedom get the mind. Problem supposedly solved. Now Leibniz found this problematic. Why? Well, his concern was about the physics. And Cartesian matter basically is inert. It's extended. It's, you probably might have heard the expression dead matter. Sounds kind of creepy. Probably was the working title for Dead Space before they picked. Dead Space did that. Good game series. Weird camera perspective though. Now, Leibniz believed that matter can't be just inert stuff. It's got to be active, basically points of force, an active view of matter. And he also thinks that matter cannot be fundamental. Why? Well, he claims, perhaps incorrectly, that matter is infinitely divisible. And an argument is pretty easy. Namely, suppose you get a chunk of matter. Let's say a chunk of cheese, say cheddar cheese. And you cut it, now what do you have? Two. And of course you can keep slicing it. And of course, if anything has a length, that means you can always keep halving it. You can always be half, because it's never going to be, it can never go down to zero. Because as long as the length is more than zero, it can always be halved. And so Leibniz says it can't be fundamental because you can keep on slicing. And he thinks the fundamental entity must be unsliceable. Now one option would be to say eventually you get to something that can't be sliced. I mean, it still has dimensions, but it's somehow unsliceable. But he thinks that's not going to do. So you need something that's going to be, but be indivisible. So it can't have any length to it. Also, he didn't like Descartes' solution of the mind-body problem. So that's not going to do. So he rejects Cartesian matter, tosses that. So what about Spinoza? Well, he basically said what you said. That's just crazy. That Spinoza says it's all just God, and Leibniz said, well, that doesn't seem true. It seems like there's, people and all kinds of stuff. He also thought that Spinoza's dual aspect view, its mind, its thought, its body, was just as bad as Cartesian dualism. So, and also pantheism. Not pantheism is just super crazy. So he ends up rejecting materialism. Why? Well, because of consciousness. He argues that you can never give a material account of consciousness. And here's his argument. He says, imagine if you were shrunk down, like Ant-Man or the Wasp style. So I guess he's anticipating them before they existed. And you're able to get inside someone's brain. No matter how much you poked around in there, you'd never actually find their feelings, thoughts, or sensations. And so he claims, because of this, consciousness is distinct from matter. That's what he claims. Now, of course, the argument can be argued against, and people have, but that's his claim. So what's it going to be then? Well, he embraces something to avoid the crazy, that also seems pretty crazy. He embraces what's called phenomenology. And he claims that reality is mental. Not in the sense of like, wow, everything's crazy, but in the sense that all the world is, it's not matter, it's all mind. So then what is matter? Well, he says he draws an analogy to a rainbow, that it is, rainbows, of course, everyone knows, they're not real. They're just, sunlight and rain
Reflecting off the.
and unicorn magic, of course. Everyone knows that, and leprechaun magic. And so they rely on something else. So he thinks matter is not fundamental, but comes from something else that is fundamental. So what is fundamental, besides reading? Well, his answer is this. The fundamental centers of science, or ideas of science, are centers of force, not particles of matter. These points are real and indivisible. They can't be broken. They're metaphysical points. So unlike physical points, they have no extension. So I guess they're zero in all physical dimensions. But unlike mathematical points, they're not theoretical abstractions. They're real. Now, he gets the idea from these things from his work on the infinitesimal calculus, in which he got a battle over with Newton. And he claims that, because he's trying to figure out how does stuff move. And his solution was that motion is a continuum of an infinite number of infinitesimal points, as opposed to like a series of discrete leaps. So now. So reality for him is a mathematically ordered continuum of forces, which sounds, pretty, well, you think of modern physics, that's kind of what they say. It's forces ordered by matter. So what are these things that make up the stuff? Well, he calls them monads, which I draw like this for no good reason, totally inaccurate. So basically, it's a not. But I like to draw them, so that's how I do it. So why does he call them monads? Well, he gets the term from the Greek word monas, which means unity or that which is one. Because they're single entities, indivisible. They are the smallest entity. And everything that is, for him, is monads. So I'm a monad, you're a monad, she's a monad too. Like the Dr. Pepper, except for monads. Now, they're immaterial, so they're not made of matter. And how many of them are there? Infinite. Infinite number of them. Now, for him, every mind is a monad. And minds, of course, can't be extended. Like, he thinks it makes no sense to say that a mind is round or 6 feet wide or blue, etc. And so the mind, and each mind is a monad, so each of us is a monad. It contains thoughts, feelings, and desires. But, just like we saw before, these qualities can't exist on their own. So there won't be like a thought kind of hanging out, or a desire just drifting by. So they have qualities somehow in them, but they're metaphysically simple, which leads to criticism, namely, how can you have something that's simple still have stuff going on inside of it? But he'd say metaphysically, they don't have any parts. There's no parts in them. So they're kind of magical in a way. Now, but wait, it gets weird. Everything is monads, and every monad is a type of mind. So all the monads perceive and have perception throughout reality. So everything, like, from us down to, sand, or even beyond sand. Now you may think, isn't that kind of weird? Well, are you, so in one sense, it is kind of weird. So for example, when you're taking a shower using soap, the soap is perceiving you, which is kind of weird. You're also perceiving soap, which is less weird. But he thinks that there are different levels of perception. So conscious entities have what's called a perception. They are conscious, they're aware of what they're perceiving. Other things like your soap, for example, is perceiving, but it's not aware that it's perceiving. So the soap is perceiving you, but it's not aware that it's doing so. If you feel bad about the soap, don't feel bad, it's not. It's perceiving, but it's not aware of it. So he thinks nature is a continuum from, well, obviously he's going to put God at the top, all the way down to the lowest monad, which would be the least perceiving monad of all. And I guess if you wanted to give a philosophical insult to someone, you could call them the least of monads, which would be the greatest bird of all.
So everybody trying to figure out what man is and how God fits into it. And they reject everybody, but using everybody's concepts to spring off of it to see they got something of their own.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That's how science, that's how everything works. That's how music works too. Think of like when people remix stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's basically philosophy and music, very similar. You build on what other people have done, and you steal their ideas and remix them. Hope you don't get sued. And they make a hologram out of you, like they made with poor Tupac and Amy Winehouse. For real. They're trying to put dead Amy Winehouse on tour as a zombie hologram. And you gotta get paid for it. Hey, if you're gonna do necromancy, you gotta get paid for the necromancy. Don't pay for itself. I think, who was it said that? Benjamin Franklin, necromancy don't pay for itself? That was him. Don't quote me on that though. Maybe it might have been Abe Lincoln. So we got these monads, ranging from the ultimate monad, God, down to the least monad of all. We'll call that T, for least. And then humans would be like in here somewhere, more than animals would be here, and lesser creatures. Now, one of the things, problems of course is, why do we have like all kinds of defective stuff? And Leibniz gives a mathematical answer. Namely, with math, you don't have gaps, you don't have like 1, 2, 5 with like gaps. You've got everything. So he thinks reality is the same way. You have everything from God, the ultimate, down to whatever it is that's just above nothing. At least that it can be.
See why I say they all got the same concept, but they're just kicking out different stuff.
Mm-hmm. Again, it's like music.
Yeah, I understand that.
Now, last thing we'll close with is, he puts forth this notion that becomes super popular. It's called the identity of indiscernibles. Let's see if I spell it right. And the idea is this. He claims if you had two identical monads, they could not be distinguished the same, and hence they can't be two different things. So it ends up becoming sometimes called Leibniz's law, that if two things are identical, they're one. They're not two. Which seems pretty reasonable. Oh, there are people that
So twins will be one.
Oh no, because they're slightly different. Twins are, we say identical twin, but really they're just like pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
But their genetics, their genes, they get the same genetic code initially, but then there's still differences. So they aren't really identical. They're just pretty similar.
They just look alikes.
They look a lot alike. Yeah, if they were truly identical, they would be one and not, because they couldn't have different experiences or thoughts or beliefs. They had to be one entity. And so because of this, he reasons every monad in the universe is unique. So one implication is we're all unique, just like everybody else. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the stuff for today. Next time we'll learn that monads have no windows and the universe exists in harmony, just like music.